Minasan konnichiwa. My name's Matt Okuhara. I'm a member of the castle shooting team based here at the Matsumoto Castle Gun Corps. The Matsumoto Castle Gun Corps is a shooting team that uses Edo-era firearms that are kept in the Castle Museum. Along with using the Hinawaju, we also maintain a collection of over 200 guns, other weapons, and sets of armour. The matchlock style of gun arrived in Japan in 1543 and changed the application of warfare on the battlefield very quickly. Within around 30 years, they were a major component of the order of battle of most forces in feudal Japan and were used heavily in battles across the country, such as Uedahara, Kawanakajima, and of course the Battle of Nagasino. The impact of firearms was so great that fortresses like Matsumoto were built with gunnery in mind. The castle keep alone, for example, has over 150 firing positions, an armoury, and a powder magazine. Some castles even had lead floors, so that if ammunition started to run low, you could dig up a few tiles and melt yourself a few more bullets. But let's talk briefly about setting up for battle. Assuming the engagement was not a spontaneous one, the careful deployment of matchlock armed troops with supporting forces was a major part of battle strategy. But these kinds of guns had a major drawback, and that was the loading time. Even an experienced gunner, under the stress of battle, could take up to 30 seconds to reload their firearm. For this reason, gunnery was not usually done as an individual, but as part of a tepotai, which is the name for a gunnery unit. The tepotai would try to fire at the same time to A. increase the accuracy of the unit, and B. increase the damage caused by the volley. For this reason, a tepotai is best deployed to a pre-prepared position, where you expect to stop in advance, or on a flank where cavalry and skirmishers can be at the very least delayed or hopefully forced back. The gunnery unit would also work in formation, similar to a firing line. This made it easier for the samurai who were in charge of the tepotai to control the shooting. It is important to get the fire control correct, as firing too quickly will not only use up the powder and ammunition, but it will also heat the guns up to the point where they can no longer be used. Some cheaper Hinawaju were jokingly referred to as noodle guns, because the barrels bent if they got too hot from sustained fire. Because of this, the whole unit would not always shoot at once. Although it was down to the tactical decision of the commander and then perception of the threat they faced, rotating fire was a tactic often employed in creating sustained fire. In addition to not consuming the ammunition too quickly, it did not heat the guns up to the point where they could not be used. Whilst one rank fires, the second and third ranks prepare to shoot, as seen in this clip. After shooting, the first rank will withdraw to the rear and the next rank will move up. Let's examine some of the guns that were used during the Warring States era. Pistols were known as tanzutsu, and although large caliber, their short range and long loading time made them impractical for battlefield use. They were sometimes used by mountain samurai, but were mostly seen as status symbols. The standard ashigaru was armed with a mass-produced banzutsu, which means numbered gun. The guns were issued and controlled by serial numbers and as such became known as banzutsu. These zamazutsu are long-barreled and large-caliber guns for defensive shooting, being around 1.5 meters in length. They needed a crew of 2 to fire. The examples in this video have a caliber of 14.5mm, so that's slightly larger than the modern 50 cal, which is a 12.7mm gun. They were ideal for shooting from defensive locations such as castles. The ozutsu is a portable cannon and required an experienced gunner to fire it. Although sometimes found in the hands of ashigaru, it was normally down to a samurai gunner to operate this type of weapon. Targets could include troops in cover, structures, gates, cavalry and tightly packed formations. Of course, one of the overlooked parts of warfare is the repair and maintenance of equipment. Soldiers are more likely to spend their time repairing and maintaining their equipment and doing routine activities than they are actually in combat. So, although these weapons aren't ever likely to go back to war, not unless there's some sort of apocalypse, we are spending our time maintaining and looking after the weapons. A lot more of the weapons' time is spent on display in the museum than it is actually for rehearsals or shooting. So there's a similarity there in that the operational time of the weapons is actually reduced compared to the display time of the weapons. Likewise in war, the weapons are not being used 100% of the time. Normally they're being carried from the battle zone or to the battlefield, to the castle, to garrison duties and from the armories. Next, let's look at the parts of a hinawaji.
これが重心です。これが台木。力いきますね。これが現代に言うと安全なんです。これが引き金。で、火ばさみになります。 で、火皿と火蓋になります。
So that is an introduction to feudal era firearms and tactics. You can find out more about this subject or the martial art of Hojutsu, which is the way of the gun, at gunsamurai.com.